Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, December 18th, 2018 meeting of the Urban Village Development Commission. I'm going to call this meeting to order right now at 7:05. But before we get into our regular agenda, we have a special guest here tonight that would like to address us for a moment. Please welcome Mayor Mary Lou Pauley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Special guest. I'm going to come more often. That was really nice. My name is Mary Lou Pauley, and I'm the mayor of Issaquah. I started serving in January of this year. I wanted to take this opportunity to come out to your commission and tell you how much, on behalf of the entire community, I appreciate what you do. I appreciate that you're serving the citizenry, and thank you for your service. There are a lot of folks who watch on TV and think you guys might be in it for the glory and the money, and I tell them there's neither of those things at all. These are just people in our community who want to be part of a conversation on issues about how we develop, how we grow, how we manage traffic. So thank you for that. I think one of the other things that it's not entirely apparent is that you're here tonight giving your time, but you also receive materials beforehand, and so I appreciate that you do your homework and you come here prepared to discuss the issues with each other, and that just doubles the amount of time you're volunteering. You're also carving it out of your personal family time. Time with friends, time with family, time doing things you'd like to do, and tonight you're spending it here with Lucy and staff to go through some issues. So it does not go unnoticed. We all appreciate what you do, and I can personally see the results when I'm for the Urban Village Development Commission. When I drive around up in the Highlands and when I drive around in Tallis and I look at the neighborhoods and I look at the amenities, and it's beautiful. And that's because of the efforts of the city staff and the commission in making sure that all these pieces fit well together and they work. So I want to thank you on behalf of the public, and I hope to come back in the new year and see you again. And thanks for your professionalism and your thoughtfulness and all the work that you do. It's really appreciated.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and we appreciate all of your leadership and support here in the city, and we wish you the best of holidays. I will note, and you can check this out, but I do think we have the best ratings of any TV show in the city. We have the best viewership, so that will continue for a little while until we're done. All right. Thank you very much. Lucy, we're going to move on to commission membership. You have something else for me?
No, just I think you can go to the minutes.
Okay, great. We'll go straight to the minutes then. So we're going to look at at the minutes from the last two meetings, which were May 1st, 2018, a couple days ago, and November 6th, 2018. We had a kind of just a structural meeting there. So has everyone had a chance to take a look at the minutes from those? Do we have any questions, comments, or edits?
No. I did not.
Carl, no?
No.
Okay.
Just laughing at the November.
Yeah. So do I need to take them separately, or can I approve them both together?
Separately.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the May 1st meeting?
Yes, I move we approve the minutes of the May 1st, 2018 UVDC meeting.
And a second? Seconded. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Passed unanimously. Let's go with November 6th, 2018. Do we have a motion?
A lot of reading there.
Motion to approve?
Second?
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Both passed unanimously. We'll now move to the public hearing. This is for Issaquah Highlands Parcel D, Preliminary Plat D, and Lucy Sloman will take us through this.
Good evening.
Hi.
So Lucy Sloman, Land Development Manager. We are here to talk about Parcel D, preliminary plat, and so I have a little introduction because this is a quasi-judicial matter. The trigger for the UVDC reviewing a project is a plat of property into four or more than four lots. Less than four lots is a preliminary plat. You make a recommendation to council, which makes this a quasi-judicial matter. So you do planning level reviews on land use actions such as site development permits or plats for compliance with the development agreement. You're not having to review technical studies. That's the staff's responsibility. And you're not reviewing the architecture, materials, and colors unless it's compensating for something that's at a planning level review. But luckily, Sarah Hoy is here and hearing the issues that may come up and then carrying that forward through the ARC. So for a quasi-judicial matter, this is like a court, which means that the proceedings not only have to be fair, but appear fair. And we do that through two things, two forms of due process. The first is procedural due process, which evaluates the relationship of the decision makers. You're not decision makers in this case, but you are making a recommendation to the decision makers. Also, we do things like notice and certain kinds of processes that make this a fair process. And then substantive due process, which means that we make our decisions based on adopted regulations. So I'd like you to read through these questions, and then I'll ask you a question about them after you've had a chance to read them. So how many people answer no to all the questions?
No, with a caveat, I'm not 300 feet, but I'm about a mile away. My house is
Right.
about a mile away. But no.
So the city attorney clarified that near the subject property, that the city, since we mail notice to property owners within 300 feet, that is a good test of whether you're near the subject property. So you're identifying that that's a recent clarification that we've made. Before that, it was more subjective. Everybody else answer no?
Correct.
Yes, no.
Oh,
Yes, I'm answering no.
thank you, Michelle. And then the second piece has to do with ex parte contacts. Ex parte contacts, all of the discussion and decision-making has to occur on the record in a public forum. So the question is, have you had any contacts outside of this setting or discussions about this permit?
No.
No.
Okay,
No.
great. And then the applicant has a chance to challenge that if they disagree. So I just want to make a point tonight, since we haven't been meeting very often, about the difference between a preliminary plat and a site development permit. Preliminary plat is the subdivision of land. We're mainly reviewing it to determine that the parcels, tracts, and lots are appropriately sized based on the uses and regulations. And so when we do that, we often don't have a lot of information. You will see that this plat, the applicant has provided us a lot of information, almost more like a site development permit. And you'll also notice that we have put some conditions on saying, thank you, that information is really helpful, but not all of it can be reviewed at this time because sometimes it's dependent on other information. For instance, there were some sections with site walls and houses showing the zone of influence and the loads, and we can't evaluate those until we know the loads of the actual house, and the building official would review that. So we consider that very helpful information, but sometimes it's beyond what we can review at this time. Any questions? Okay. So now I'm going to start my presentation related to the plat. First of all, where is the site located? It's the green, neon teal green here. You can see that it's mostly surrounded by residential properties. To the south and east is Forest Ridge, which was a plat that was done about 10 years ago, but also by Polygon. To the northeast is Avalon Windhaven, which was one of the first projects built at Issaquah Highlands. It's a rental project. Sunset Walk is a townhouse project that was done maybe 6-7 years ago. And then you can see that there are even more like Sunridge down here. At the same time, there are also some institutional uses nearby, like Grand Ridge Elementary, Central Park, and the possibility of Bellevue College very close by. In the other direction, we have Grand Ridge Plaza, which is potentially within walking distance of this property. Some photos to give you a sense of the context. I started up here on the east and kind of worked my way around clockwise. So the first image is looking down College Drive towards the property. You can see that there's quite a bit of vegetation at this point. However, just 4 years ago, you can see that there was not a lot of vegetation, but it does give you a sense of the kind of views, territorial views that will be available from these homes. The third, fourth, and fifth pictures are kind of standing at one point on 14th Place. This is looking kind of southeast towards the homes, and it gives you a sense of what's been built in the area. Number 4 is looking across the property towards Avalon Windhaven, so you can see it's a wide variety of rental properties. There's sort of townhouse, stacked flat, garden apartments. There's a lot of different housing types that were included in that project. Number 5 is looking back the other way to this house, which will be immediately adjacent to the new homes. And then number 6 is down in Sunset Walk at the bottom of the hill, sort of looking up. And so this project would be up here. So now sort of zooming in to more specifics about Parcel D, it's just over an acre. It has 10 lots and 2 tracts. One tract out here on the edge, tract B, is for recreation. The other is tract A, which is most of the Woonerf and about half of the neighborhood walk trail. The neighborhood is proposed to be house and garden, which sets the kind of guidelines for the project. And there is an adjacent engineered slope in this location. Streets. Most of the streets around the property already exist. This includes 15th Falls Drive, which it's one street with 2 names that switches about here. College Drive, which heads off to the east, 14th Place. And then the one new sort of shared use street is the Woonerf, that's shown here in blue. I always have to look because the way it renders on the screen is not the same as it on my screen. There is a bit of parallel parking in the area. There's about 4 parallel parking spaces right now on Falls Drive in this location. And then there are some across the street from Parcel D on 14th Place. Parking. Parking is not technically part of the plat, but because they have provided this higher level of review, and we know it's always of a lot of interest to the commissioners and the public, we're happy to include it in our presentation. The on-site parking is shown here on the left. The 2 blue boxes that are shown inside the garage, 2 side-by-side parking stalls, meet all the required parking. Additionally, there are 2 parking stalls shown here in orange on the apron or driveway into the garage. On the surrounding area, applicant has proposed some changes along the Falls Drive frontage to partly accommodate driveways and to try and preserve some on-street parking. Some of this we have accepted, some of this we have not accepted. The green change, which is right here, is the one we accepted. The 2 parking stalls here and here with the blue X's on them, we, per the rules the city uses now, are not allowed. This one is too close. This one is too close to the crosswalk. This one is too close to an intersection. So that would leave 1 on-street parking stall. In the staff report, you would notice that we did talk about whether their Lot 2's garage should be oriented to the Woonerf. Staff are not recommending that, but we just wanted to bring it to the commission's attention if they were interested in discussing that.
Lucy, can
Yeah.
you go to the slide prior to parking? I wanted to look at the driveways sort of in context
Oh, sure. So,
of the, well, actually, I'm looking at the context of the other houses. I think there are 6 driveways that come out onto, so that's Falls Drive.
yes.
And I was looking,
Well, actually, 5. Lot 1 does not have theirs onto Falls Drive.
it's around the corner, that's what I
Right.
was thinking of, on the
Right.
street. but
So
okay.
2 through 6 do.
And then all those houses to the, I guess that'd be southeast, they're all coming out on Falls Drive with their driveways, aren't they?
So the ones across the street over here.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
looking at the picture, but yes.
Yes.
They're on the drive.
Right, you can, that's why I put that picture in. So yes, all the homes on the edge have their driveways off of Falls Drive. The internal block has them off of an alley. And then, again, these houses on the western edge have them off the street. So it's Forest Ridge is a combination of both front-loaded and alley-loaded, as we call it.
As an isolation, it looks like it'd be sort of disruptive, but in context of the rest of the neighborhood,
Right.
it's consistent is what I was
Yep.
looking for. Okay.
So pedestrian system along, pedestrian and bicycle system, actually. So these sort of bright blue lines of Falls Drive and 15th and College Drive, these two streets have both sidewalks on both sides as well as bike lanes on both sides. 14th Place has sidewalks on both sides. There is a kind of shortcut through the block, meeting the neighborhood trail, a neighborhood walk trail standard, which provides a shortcut to ease people who are heading east or north. And then there is the VUNERF. As you may remember, a VUNERF is a shared surface shared by cars and pedestrians in a sort of small, slower speed area. The other piece that I would point out, which is down here in the lower right corner, is to provide easy access. This is where the mail kiosk is, over here in this, at this point. They have proposed, this is an unusual thing, and we've encouraged it, and this is the first time we've seen it, where many of these houses that face Falls Drive will have a gate and some stepping stones to make it easier for them to shortcut into the VUNERF and access their mail. And we think that's a really good thing about building community and being able to get to the public spaces rather than having them very segregated, only facing Falls Drive. Just to zoom in on the neighborhood walk for a moment, it is required to be 10 feet wide. It's provided in an easement across lots 4 and 5. It has the appropriate dimensions of a 4-foot walk. In this case, it's concrete, and then 3 feet of landscape on either side. And you can see that basic setup down here. The one reason I wanted to put this on is because it is an easement on lot, and it is kind of very tightly woven in between the houses. Lot 4 can have a fence, as is shown here, but Lot 5 can't. You're not allowed to have a fence in that 3-foot landscape area, and there's not, the 3 feet ends at the face of the house. I point that out mostly because the section showed a fence. The plan did not show a fence, and so I just want to be clear that there would not be a fence on Lot 5. There'll be some kind of hedge or landscape material along that edge, but they wouldn't have a fence until they get to their backyard. Block length, I know you guys are always interested in that. So as I mentioned, this is a pretty steep slope. I've kind of dropped the Plat in here. From that neighborhood walk north to Park Drive is about 325 feet. From the neighborhood walk south to the intersection, 195 feet. And then from the VUNERF down to the trail, it's about 590 feet. That's longer than we typically like, but with the steep-ish slope, it really is challenging to try and get more connections down the slope to serve that area. Parks and open space, this is the landscape plan that was included. Mostly it is the trail and the VUNERF. However, out at the end of the VUNERF, out looking over that territorial view, they have proposed a kind of terrace with various amenities that will be available. I dropped in the 2 sections that were included. We would go through a process following Plat where we would review this with the applicant and the IHCA. We have put one condition on it that the terrace needs to include not big toys, but some kinds of things that kids can interact with. Maybe it's water, there are art pieces that they've shown, maybe those art pieces are things that would be appropriate for kids to interact with, but we haven't specified that at this time.
Lucy, so I read in here that would be, so it said that the city would work in conjunction with IHCA for that, but IHCA would maintain it. How does that work? Who pays for it? Does the developer pay for it? And
Yes.
then it's maintained by IHCA at that point?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's pretty standard with our areas. That's the importance of Sarah being a part of this. We are trying to give everyone a chance to weigh in and participate. However, when the final plat, the thing that officially segregates the property is submitted, we will ask the IHCA to provide us with a letter saying that they will accept it. And if they don't, then the homeowners association that includes this plat would be responsible for maintaining it.
Thank you.
Can I ask for more clarification on that? When I was reading the staff's recommendation, I might have misread that, but I got the impression that it was not just that open area, but it was the 4 homes would belong to one HOA, and the other 6 homes would be with a different HOA. Did I misread that?
Yes, but it may be the way I wrote it. I did put in there, there is the possibility that this might be its own HOA. I know.
Meaning?
For the 10 lots, I'm sorry. So that the 10 lots could be their own homeowners association. Our preference would be that they join the Forest Ridge Homeowners Association because it has more viability and Polygon, helped create that. On the other hand, they have the right to say no. I know that they've reached out to them, and we'll see what happens over the course of leading up to the final plat. But there would be a homeowners association one way or the other.
Okay, and so to clarify, we're not recommending that the 10 homes be split. You keep the 10 homes together, regardless of which HOA they go with, and it's just this open park area that we have a different recommendation for.
So it's a question of who's going to maintain the common spaces. So there would be, all 10 homes would go one place or the other. And I would assume that if the IHCA did not take maintenance responsibility, then one of those homeowner associations would have to take maintenance responsibility. I assume it would be the same one that the homes joined, whether it was their own or Forest Ridge.
And to be clear, all falls under the master IHC HOA, and these are just subsets.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. That's one thing that we learned with Issaquah Highlands, not because it was a problem, but we thought that was wise that they set it up, that there is a master residential and a master non-residential that then ensures that there is a viable, financially healthy HOA.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Design enhancement, on these small lots where there are trails and open spaces and corner lots, it's important that certain enhancements happen on those sides that are exposed or that trail goes by. This is a very common condition that we typically put on. We have in the past asked that the lots be wider, but we also recognize that sometimes that it isn't necessary to have a wraparound porch. It's just necessary to detail it like it's the front of a house rather than a side that wouldn't be seen. And so that's the way the condition is written. Easements, the really sexy part of tonight's presentation. So inside the plat, There are two tracks, as I mentioned. There's Tract A and Tract B. And then the neighborhood walk trail is partly in an easement, which is this sort of brown color, and then partly in Tract A. And so there was some clarification that we thought was necessary, and we have 3 conditions associated with that. First, we realized that there was no easement over lots 8 and 9 that connected Tract A to Tract B. And so we've just written a condition that says there needs to be an easement that will allow other homeowners and the public to get out to this tract. Second, this easement over 4 and 5, there was an easement, it just wasn't very specific. We just said that should be to the city with maintenance by either the HOA or the IHCA. And then the last one, I used a fairly standard condition and realized I didn't fully update it. So the edits that you see sort of see in red, such as taking out E and J and adding parks, is just to make this fit this situation. I grabbed it from another staff report.
So why doesn't Tract A extend beyond or through 8 and 9 and go all the way to the open space? Why is that different? Why?
I think you should ask the applicant that. That is certainly possible, and you could do that. They chose to make the lots a little bit larger, and so taking that approach, we just recommended providing an easement between the two. It's actually not uncommon in a lot of, when you see the little VUNERFs that serve 3 or 4 homes, the last lot, it usually comes all the way out. And so I think that's just kind of a design preference. For us, an easement would serve that. So I'll let you ask the applicant when they make their presentation.
Okay.
Any other questions about easements? Then the last one just is some functionality and design issues. As I mentioned, we had a higher level of detail than we sometimes get with plats. One thing that we noticed is that there are several kind of short to moderate height walls, which is fine. It's just that several of these cross property lines, and we wanted to be sure that it was possible to replace them. And so that might be an easement, it might be a different kind of construction technique. So we've just written a condition that says, as part of submitting the walls, either with the building permits or the site work permit for their construction, that it address how that replacement would take place. And then the last issue has to do with Lot 1. You can see that in the proposal, the driveway came straight out to 14th Place. There were several concerns that we had about that. One is that it's very close to the property line and close to the VUNERF, and there was a concern that there might be confusion on a dark, rainy night, someone driving in the wrong place. It's closer to the property line than the street standards would typically have it. It creates effectively a very long curb cut in this location, and just the urban design guidelines talk about what are appropriate termini at the end of a vista. So we have 14th Place coming all the way along and kind of focused on a garage door. So what we've recommended is to reorient the garage off the VUNERF and then reorient the driveway so you still get the 2 guest parking spaces available. It's just not leading up to the garage door. Any questions? Okay. Lastly, there was a lot of public comment from neighbors, and I'm not necessarily addressing all of it. There was responses to all of it in the staff report, but I did want to touch on one of the points, which was, don't build on this property. And of course, it's always nice to have open space across the street. When the development agreement was approved, about 400 acres of, of the about 2,000 acres, 400 of it was allowed to be developed. And all that density was kind of clustered into that smaller area. And so the premise of the development agreement is that for setting aside all this area that's in that sort of seafoam green, they were allowed to, any property that is not a critical area, that is inside the urban area, is allowed to be developed. And additionally, when you buy a piece of property, you also buy the entitlement that goes with it. And so the applicant has bought the property and bought the entitlement, and those are the two things that, from a development agreement perspective, allow you to build on a piece of property. It's an oddity. I will admit that the King County website and our website show this as being owned by the Parks Department. I have no idea why. I have reached out to both of them. But we also recognize that, you know, when the city owns property, no department owns a piece of property. It actually is a reflection of who maintains the property. But there wouldn't be a way for the public to know that. And that's why we urge people to contact us before they buy their property so we can explain any oddities in the neighborhood. But as a piece of city-owned property, the city can make lots of different choices with that property. And I guess the other thing I would add is just a year or two ago, we were here speaking with the Urban Village Development Commission about potentially the TDRs, the transfer of development rights down near the Park and Ride that Polygon bought. And we had a conversation with the community because they were concerned that there was a plan to put 50 affordable housing units on this property. And in response, partly in response to those concerns that the community voiced, the council moved those 50 affordable housing units down near the Park and Ride and limited this property to 10 market rate units, which is what we're seeing today.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
I know that was going to come up as a question. Any questions for Lucy before we move on to the applicant? Obviously, we'll have time to ask questions throughout. Okay. Thank you, Lucy.
Yep.
I will state for those that are here from the public that we will also have a public comment section. We have a clipboard right here with a sign-up sheet. If you would like to speak, I ask that you please put your name and information on there, and when it comes time for public comment, will be after the applicant presentation. We will go ahead and hear from everybody. We'll ask that everybody limit their comments to 5 minutes or less, and to obviously stick to the topic at hand. So at this time, who's coming up from the applicant? Richard? All right, welcome.
Thank you. Let's get this wrong. Hi, good evening. Richard Rawlings with Polygon Northwest. Our address, if we need to enter that, is 11624 Southeast 5th Street in Bellevue. As usual, Lucy and staff, you know, just do a bang-up job. I mean, honestly, it's always thorough. It always basically does as good or better job summarizing than we could. What I did here were two questions that I could probably help clarify. The first is regarding HOA and the membership of these 10 lots with the HOA. There's, in general, for the single-family communities on the Hill, there's one HOA. It's the IHCA. So, and Sarah can speak to this, the plan is that these will become a member of that association. There isn't a Forest Ridge Association, for example. So if that,
I'm glad to hear that. I had misread the report as if we were going to split the 10 homes.
not the
to two
intent at
different
all.
HOAs.
And, yeah,
It was
yeah.
my error reading it. Glasses.
So there is no sub-HOA for that, for Forest
Yeah.
Ridge at all?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I was surprised to read that, actually. Okay.
You will see sub-associations, particularly like in the condos that we
Right.
develop. That's not something that the IHCA, for example, exterior buildings and all of that kind of management of a condominium, they are a sub-association of the IHCA or the master association, yeah. And then Secondly, on the, Lucy, how do I just pop up the easement
Oh, keep going, just push the arrows down.
down?
Keep going. There.
I think the question was about the yellow area between Tract A and the park.
Yeah.
I think that was honestly just sort of an oversight. Very typically in the plats, if you have lots sharing a common access tract or something, the last two won't provide access for the front two. So we'll probably just amend that tract to extend all the way to the park.
I
So
think,
just to-
I mean, for what it's worth, I'd prefer that just for simplicity purposes, and
Yeah.
you understand where we're going with that, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
And not a question, but the portion of the pedestrian walkway that's in an easement is in an easement to preserve certain setbacks and lot size or certain other constraints. So that if that was part of a tract, those houses might have to actually be set back 4 or 5 or some number of feet from the edge of the tract.
Right.
If it's an easement, then the lot line can be preserved, the public can access, but it doesn't influence the spacing of the homes.
Yeah, I think the thing that would concern me, and I'm not saying that this would happen, but it could happen, that, I've seen people who, use their driveways and then they decide to park another car perpendicular to their other cars because it's on my property that I can park there, and then someone would be trying to walk past that, and someone would be like, hey, it's my property, I can park my car there. To me, that is a possibility. There are people who are a little less considerate than others at times, and I just hate to see something like that happen.
And for sure, and maybe in this case, that's not so much of a concern because those two particular houses have their porches wrapping there. The driveways are on the opposite side.
Oh, they are?
From the trail. You-
So
oh,
8 and 9, they're coming,
Oh,
they go
sorry,
right
yeah.
to that, right? Through
Gotcha.
tracking, yeah.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
I do now. I thought you were talking about the walkway easement through.
Oh, no, I'm talking
4
the
and 5.
number 3 there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So let me interrupt. So with 8 and 9, as I was reading this report, the actual cement or driveway or easement or whatever it is going to have something physically different in its composition to make it visually apparent that that is an easement for pedestrians to get through.
Yes, so the driveways are concrete, the VUNERF is concrete. There's a different scoring pattern and a different textural pattern.
Okay.
And the scoring is, like joints, and then the driveways are an exposed aggregate, so it's more of a pebble surface. So there's a
There's a
distinction
visual
in the way the
difference.
pavement reads.
And then I guess it would be number 4, where the pedestrian easement is there.
Yeah.
As I was reading this document, it looks like the easement literally is against the foundation of the home. Is that just translation on the paperwork? It's not physically touching the side of the home?
It could be within inches,
Okay,
The-
and there would
the
be a fence
easement.
there?
The easement, not
but
necessarily
not the
construction.
Yeah, not the
the
construction.
walkway is a 4-foot walkway, and so it's the buffer that on paper is touching or very close.
Okay.
It'll be a landscape area.
Okay, and then, as Lucy was saying, though, that would be fenced, so is the fence touching the side of that home, or is it set back?
Yep. There we go. So I think Lot 4 should be somewhat graphically clear. That's the lower lot. The line with the circles in it periodically, that's representing a fence. And so that's at or outside of the buffer of the sidewalk. So there's the fence line, then a landscape strip, then the walk. On the north side of the walk, the fence is, you can see the same symbol in the rear lot line going vertically. Here. So there's this fence represented. It probably should have been represented returning to the rear corner of this house. So what Lucy was explaining is that there wouldn't be any fence within the required walkway and buffer zone.
For House 5, but there
Yeah.
is one for House 4, and I'm just questioning the location of the fence relative to House 4 is all.
Am I misunderstanding?
So
just jump in. No, don't go anywhere. Nick with Polygon as well. So I think you're asking about this location right here.
That's right there,
So
yep.
I think when you look at the lower right-hand corner, there is going to be a separation between the fence and the house. They
Okay,
won't be
thank you.
touching.
In other words, a person could walk from the front to the back for house 4. I guess that was my question. So they're not hiking over the fence. Okay.
Yeah, it might be tight.
It'll be tight. All right, I'll go on a diet.
So other questions for us, for the applicant, but those are the ones I heard.
Commissioner Lee, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. Mr. Rush? Carol, please. Yep. Michelle? Okay. All right. Let's see.
Well, actually, I did have another question.
Oh, I know.
And this may be, I apologize, this may be too early in the process. I did see in the write-up that Recology, or our trash pickup, has already okayed this plan. But how will trash be handled for the homes that are on the internal part?
Let me, oh, actually, that's the perfect plan. So you see how on this part, it looks like you can see a truck, the wheels of a truck kind of
can, okay.
moving? So this was actually the auto turn, showing that they would pull up to here, they could back in, that's what this little kind of nib here is for, and then pull out.
Okay, thank you.
And so they would just put their trash cans out like anyone else does, and they would just drive in and pick it up. And Recology looked at that and said that would be fine.
I've got one more question to piggyback on, Michelle. So Eastside Fire, I know it said in here that they have to approve it conditionally. They just bought a big tiller truck that's a rear steer kind of truck. And I live in Magnolia Park, and I watch them do exercises with it, trying to get around corners and get through the neighborhood. Is that going to be a factor in this, or is it just a sign off from them, or how does that work?
So my guess, no, their assistant fire marshal is embedded in our department. We work very closely with him. Doug will give me the high sign if I get this wrong. But typically for a project like this, they would pull hose in. Within 150 feet as the hose lays, they would pull hose in and fight a fire that way and not pull the big truck in.
Okay.
Okay.
Richard, I do have a question. Can you speak to, well, first of all, Lucy mentioned that Lot 1, basically we talked about reconfiguring the driveway so that it comes in off the Woonerf, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's true. And then there would be a parallel parking area for the guest spots, is that correct? They're not linear, they're not, yeah, they're,
I don't know.
Am I getting
if
that
you
right?
Potentially saw an exhibit that,
Pull in from the guest spot to the garage, you're parking next to the
yeah.
garage.
So like there would be
okay.
something
So
flat next to the garage.
Our,
Okay, yeah.
our intent on this lot would be that the garage door faces that Woonerf. There is no driveway per se.
Right.
Like an alley-loaded home, like across the street in Forest Ridge.
Yep.
2 internal parking stalls, no surfaced outside guest parking. That would be a yard area.
No surface outside guest parking. So where, and it,
So where did the lower right graphic come from that shows?
yeah, because that looks like additional surface parking right
Yeah,
there.
so this is the garage location, and so
Yep.
they would come off the Woonerf here.
Yeah.
I don't really know the origin of this. I believe Lucy was having conversations and during the
Lucy
staff-
drew on her own. No. I think, they're not required to do these two. It was just to preserve the opportunity that since the original proposal had 2 in the garage and would have accommodated 2 on the apron, even though that's not required, we just were looking for an opportunity to preserve 2 in the garage and 2 on on-lot guest parking spaces. But that is voluntary. They could choose, as Richard said, to make that yard and not do it the way it's shown here.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, because one of my questions was that it's not required, I was going to state that it's not required, so I was curious how and why that was there. I like the idea of it being there to some degree, but at the same time, it would seem to me that I think other people would park there if they saw extra parking spots, right?
And
Unless-
maybe we come up with a solution that says, well, we want one. You know, some
Yeah.
yard, some extra, but I guess as the applicant, we weren't necessarily going to commit to providing 2 external parking stalls on that lot.
And I'm not, I'm not suggesting you do either. I think what I would say is if you do any, 1 or 2, and it probably doesn't even have to be said, but I'm going to say it anyways, I would want to ensure, especially if I was the purchaser of that lot, that it would be obvious and dedicated to my lot and not just parking for anybody that would be, say, oh, here's an extra spot.
Right.
And then the
Thank you
second.
for not making it motorcycle parking. We appreciate that.
I haven't gotten to that yet. No. And then the other thing is, can you speak to Lot 2 and the potential of reconfiguring that so that that actually enters off the VUNIF as well? Because I think that seems to me that would be the best idea overall for the front of Falls Drive, but I'd like to understand what you're thinking.
I think for that lot, that would be more problematic than the sort of solution to Lot 1 coming off there. Partly because you eat up the yard, so there just isn't depth there. Oh, is there a better slide?
It's okay.
Are you talking about in the front or the back?
Where's a good one?
Well, there was one that and here's one that shows.
Sure. And so the typical garage depth is something like 22 or somewhere in there. It's a little longer than the parking stall so that we have the recycle bins and those kinds of things. So it basically, by putting the parking in the back, we're going to eat up that yard. And then it's a 2-story house. You're putting a wall in your living space that, your typical either kitchen or living room or whatever there. So we would not want to do that on this particular house and lot.
So what does that do, even just changing number 1, even having it on the side or the back?
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm just trying to think visually. All of the other ones, 2 through 6, have driveways and garages in the front. The last one does not. I don't know, aesthetically, is that weird to anybody or just me? Not that we can change it, but I'm just curious. I was kind of thinking if 2, because it seems like a smaller lot, if that was reoriented to get service from the VUNIF, then it might sort of ease that transition, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I've gone back and forth on it, Jeff. Part of 1 had the enhancements, right, the view enhancements, because it's facing. So since you're on that corner, it makes it less garage heavy and actually gives the advantage of the visual enhancements on both the east and the south side there. So
Which I like
so you
that
sort of
change.
soften that.
Yeah. But that's not the same issue on 2.
I was wishing more of the garages went inside, similar to 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Well, that's what I was
But that
thinking
doesn't seem
too.
to be- yeah.
And then, I always have an issue with lack of on-street parking. I'm sensitive to the current residents that there's probably some parking challenges today. I drove through there today just to look at the entire layout, but I went at a time that maybe it's not the most busy with cars parked there. It was during the late morning. So I don't know, I always like to preserve as much parking as we can. That said, I'm not a big fan of, trying to encourage a developer to make a bunch of sacrifices for one
Right.
parking stall.
Go ahead.
The only thing I was going to say is we might want to take public comment and then come back to some of the debating of these nuances, because
Yep.
I think what you're talking about is what might serve the larger community, and I think it would be good to give them a chance to weigh in before we.
Can I ask one question prior? So in the past, when we've done this, you've had multiples, 1x, 1.5, 2x of required for parking. Where does this fall in?
So 2 parking stalls per unit is the requirement. We have, down in Westridge, we were like 3.5 stalls, but that's gravy. Only 2 is required.
Okay.
I have one more question on lot, or unit 1. And this shows the different orientation, but you were talking, Richard, they'd be that other more east-west orientation for the garage. Can they get in and out of that garage without a 7-point turn off the
Yeah,
Booner?
well, we'll need to make sure that they have the room.
Okay.
And the standard would be something similar to the homes across the street, the alleys, 18-foot alley, and then a certain setback to something physical.
Because it was
that
so
you can-
short up against the Booner post, my concern there.
Yeah.
Last thing for me right now, and I think, so Lucy really answered this by stating her case, but I think want to bring it up again, and that is that a lot of stuff that I read and noticed was, there was some concerns about previous ownership and people being told that they're always going to have a view in front of them, or we've heard this a bunch of times in the Highlands. I bought a house, there weren't houses in front of me. I always expected to never have any houses in front of me. We know that that's really never been the case in the Highlands as far as I can tell. But I just want to state again that this was owned by the city, correct? This piece of land was owned by the city.
It was originally owned, I think, by Port Blakely, and it was given to the city with an entitlement of 50 affordable housing
Right,
units.
Right.
Part of it was sold to Polygon to create those houses across the street. Let me see if I can find.
Washed out?
Yeah, I don't. Okay. So these four were part of that larger Parcel D.
Okay.
And then when this plat was going through, the city sold part of this and then did a lot line adjustment to create a little bit more, even though this doesn't seem regular, it made it a little more square and a little less with some wonky edges. And so the parcel was basically set up during that time, and the city has just held on to it. I mean, I think when we thought Bellevue College was going to come in and there were 50 affordable housing units, it seemed like an opportunity to build student or,
Yep.
low-income housing to support that. We're not sure what's going to happen. There's been so many changes in presidents of Bellevue College. Some of the more recent ones have expressed less excitement about this use, so we really don't know what's going to happen on that property.
Okay, thank you. And then that leads me really to the question, and that is, have there ever been, to your knowledge, any declarations about the plans or the future plans or use for that property saying, we intend to use this as a park, we intend to use this as anything?
Well, kind of as I said, the affordable housing has been the main use that has been attached to this. And at the time that we were processing those, making the decision the council was making the decision about whether to allow the 100 additional units down near the park and ride, this parcel came into play in terms of is there an affordable housing, if you're adding more units to the development agreement, because there was a requirement for affordable housing with the development agreement, should more affordable housing be required, and thus Polygon build some affordable housing on this property. So that's when we had a conversation which included some residents of Forest Ridge. There were a handful of people who showed up. So that's really been the only use that we have had in association with this
So
property.
nobody's ever said, we are intending to turn this into a park, or we'd like to consider turning it into a park? That, as far as you know?
Not
that's
that
never-
I've heard,
Yeah,
yeah.
I haven't heard that either. I just was curious.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. All right. Anything else? Anything else from the commission? No? Thank you, Mr. Rawlings. Appreciate it. Okay, I have currently 3 people on the list. Zhen Xu, would you like to come up and state your name and address, please? Keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And my name is Jen. I live right across this Plat, and my home address is 1697 Northeast 4th Drive. So I moved to Issaquah in 2017, and so we heard about this development, but which we have never heard about before we moved in. So yes, it is blocking our view, but this is not my biggest concern. My biggest concern is, as you can see from the map, it's a very well-developed community already, so any constructions can be really harmful to all the community members. So what I'm talking about is, like, for example, you can see like kids cycling around the community road, and also you can see like women with like infant strollers like walking around. So I feel like construction will be really harmful with all the dust, the noises, and the wastes. And in addition to that, me and my husband, we met for 8 years, and we are expecting our first baby this summer. So it has been really bumpy to get pregnant, so it's really important for us to live in a peaceful, quiet, and safe environment while expecting the baby. And I believe I'm not the only person or only woman in this community who are getting pregnant and expecting baby. So I know my neighbors who are not here today. My neighbor on my right-hand side, like right next door, she is home taking care of 2 little kids, and she is planning to have another baby soon too. So this caused me like a lot of concerns. If constructions are going on, what will happen to the little ones and the women who are expecting babies? And also, another concern is also about the traffic. So we were talking about like, looks like we are going to eliminate some of the parallel parking spaces we have right now. For example, my neighbor on the other side, she has a pickup trunk, so she cannot park the trunk inside her garage. So she has to park along the curb parking. She is worried about like if the new development goes on, it will be a problem for her to find a parking space. And I think I heard, like you mentioned earlier, you kind of walk around today in late morning, but late morning is usually a very, it's quieter time because people all go to work. So if you come by around sunset, later, near evening, so you will see like it's really very intense to find a parking space. So I personally park inside my garage. I don't park anywhere outside my house, but I do have guests coming, especially during holidays, so it can be a problem for them. And also talking about traffic, so we believe if construction goes on, there will be traffic of heavy trucks, construction vehicles. It can be a potential risk to this peaceful community already. So it may be a problem if kids are playing around and they don't really pay attention to like cars and vehicles coming by. So I mean, I feel like it can cause some risks too. I feel it is a very small piece of land for the city, for our applicants, but for me, because I live right across the street, so it will mean a lot to me. And I am not working full time, so that means I will be home a lot while I'm pregnant. So, and also after deliver the baby, like around June, it will requires even more like quiet time for me and for the baby to grow. So this is my biggest concern. Even though it is blocking my view, it's adding more traffic to the first drive, and I may have problem pulling out of my car from my garage because my new neighbors may potentially pulling out his car too. So yeah, thank you so much. That's my comments.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Is it, excuse me, Leah Dwyer?
Okay, my name is Leah, and I live with some roommates in the Avalon, whatever it's called right now, the Windhaven development, the apartments. We also have close friends that did previously have a house on Northeast Falls Drive earlier in its development time. And so this is my first rodeo experiencing this type of process, and it seems very clear to me that you guys put a lot of time and energy into planning these things and the details, and so I did not honestly understand that before. So it seems like parking and accessibility is something that has been coming up, and I guess this might sound a little backwards, but would you guys mind just speaking a little bit to why something like this ends up being necessary versus kind of when we briefly talked about it, instead of it turning into like a public park or preserving the land as just a general land preservation or open space? Like, is this something that is like long decided in the development process, and then everything is gradually built, or just so that if I share this with the community and people that aren't as aware, they have a better understanding of why this ends up happening?
But we're not really allowed to make this a dialogue, but I appreciate
okay.
the question, and I will
Okay.
perhaps make a comment during our discussion moment. But
Okay.
thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next on the list is Sarah Hoey.
Hello, happy holidays. I have been working with Polygon on this project for, it seems like a couple years now. Yes, it was part of.
Sarah, can you identify yourself for the
Yeah, I'm
record,
sorry.
please?
Sarah Hoy, Executive Director for Issaquah Highlands Community Association. Thank you. And so I've been working with Polygon for a number of years on this. Yes, there was some discussion originally about it being affordable housing. When there was an open UVDC hearing, I believe, there were some comments that people didn't want affordable housing next to their homes. And therefore, I think the applicant that's why they've come up with a single family option, which is fine. So I want to talk about a number of things that have come up on questions from you. The HOA, IHCA, will be responsible for the common area elements as we are for the entire Issaquah Highlands. And so with that, this will not, if it was a condo, they would have their own HOA, right? Like a sort of sub-HOA, and then they have responsibility still to the master IHCA. But this will just be straight master IHCA. So we'll maintain any elements that they put into the park setting area. We'll maintain any elements as trash collection services, pet waste stations, benches, those types of things. And then we'll continue to work with the city and with Polygon all through the project. We have not seen the actual like colors for the buildings themselves. We've seen some sort of ideas of what the houses will look like. And speaking to lot number 1 with it sort of being at an odd angle, we've seen that type of situation in the Sunridge community, which was Aichijo, where we just have this, it was sort of added on to the rest of Forest Ridge, and then it had a weird curve, and then some are inside garages and some are street facing, and then there's sort of one. So I believe that type of layout has already presented itself at Sunridge, which I would be in favor of making a strong recommendation to the applicant to allow 2 additional parking spaces for that lot 1. One of the questions or concerns that I do want the commission to think about is the amount of traffic that we have. You can see here where it comes off of College Drive. And there is a slight incline from where Windhaven comes up, and then we're right onto someone's driveway. So that's going to be a tricky area. I think we need to be very cognizant of the street signage that's available for that area. I think that if we could maybe even make some different type of paving. We've got a lot of kids that speed down College Drive. It's continuously reported drag racing. That's a long strip with no interruptions, so the kids tend to horse around on College Drive. And then you're going to have houses right there now, too. So that's a tricky intersection that I would like the city to consider. As far as the walls along Tract A, I believe it was. Yes, Tract A. Any walls that would retain the soil of a particular lot would then be the homeowner's responsibility to maintain, and to maintain the drainage in as well. So the IHCA would not take that responsibility. And we've already done that with Polygon and Westridge South, where they had massive retention areas, and either the homeowners take responsibility for the drainage and the maintaining of those walls, or the IHCA. And in most cases, it was the homeowners that actually did that. With the Wooners, we have a lot of experience with this. Pinecrest, which was the Toll Brothers project, had Wooners in there. They are a bit of a parking challenge for us, because it says, don't park there, tow away zone, but who's going to tow them away? I've got to sign the tickets. That means I've got to get up at 3 in the morning and sign someone's ticket to have somebody's car towed. So I am not a fan of the HOA taking on the Wooners, and we did that with Westridge South with the Wooners. They are the individual owner's responsibility to maintain and to police. So that is written into that. Fencing, again, with the between lots 4 and 5, where one has a fence and one doesn't have a fence, that would be a similar type situation that we have at Pinecrest again, going sort of through the 2 houses over to the Stairway of Heaven. Those 2 houses are very thickly lined with bushes, and then I think one of them has a fence and one of them doesn't. So that meets the requirements of IHCA. Other than that, that is about it. Does anyone have any questions? I know you can't really. If there's anything I haven't covered.
Thank you, Sarah. Are
Okay.
you going to be here for a few minutes?
Yeah,
Because I
I'll
have
be here.
something
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah.
On another topic that
Yeah,
I'd like you to
absolutely.
address maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else like to speak during the public comment section? Asking one last time. Okay, at this time at 8:11, we will close the public comment section for this preliminary plat. Thank you very much. We appreciate everybody's thoughtfulness and comments, and we know that construction projects around your homes can definitely affect people's quality of life during certain times. Sometimes, we might find that after it's all done, things are even better. Sometimes they're not. But we know that people are affected in different ways, so we appreciate your thoughts on that. Before I open it up to further discussion, I will not directly answer one of the questions, but I will state as a general statement, when somebody owns a piece of land, whether it's here in the Highlands or elsewhere, and they have entitlements on it, they have the right to develop it within the agreement that they are under and any entitlements that they have. And I think we have to respect people's property rights. That's always been my take, not only my personal take, but obviously there's a legal standpoint here where somebody owns land, they have the right to build it as long as it's within the rules and regulations of the particular development agreement or zoning, yeah, that might be around. So that's my general statement on that. I'd also like to bring up, every time a new development comes up, traffic tends to come up, parking tends to come up. This is a combination of good building practices, sensitivity to the current surroundings and neighbors, and available or lack thereof of parking. And so hopefully the developer will do everything they can to maximize what they can without compromising safety or anything else. And then the other part of that is enforcement, and whether it's Wooner enforcement with the HOA or the police. This has always been an issue for me, and we know that the police are pretty well stretched, but we need to continue to encourage through the HOA, through our own involvement with the police department and our comments to their non-emergency line, that things still need to be policed. If we're concerned about people drag racing on a road or driving fast up through the apartments or parking illegally or whatever it is, we need to voice that stuff as citizens. I know that I'm guilty of voicing my voice all the time on this stuff, but that's not the responsibility of the developer, unfortunately, or the community, of which many of us are a part. So anyway, those are my comments to start off with. Yes.
I'd like to also make a comment on this. I would like to compliment both the city and the developer who listened to community input a year ago when we were talking about putting a 50-unit large-scale development of low-income housing here. And the community and the homeowners in this immediate vicinity and in this area spoke to the developer and said, please don't do that. Please put in single-family homes. And that's exactly what this developer has come back and done. So I think the city and the developer deserve our acknowledgement that we listened to the community saying, please do not put 50 units here, do something smaller. So we've gone from 50 down to 10.
Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else have any comments?
Yeah, it's sort of a general class of comments. There's a handful of things that have been brought up tonight that are obvious now in these types of discussions that won't be obvious to people who eventually own these homes. We had the maintain and police discussion, which is, sorry, Sarah, laughable. The developer's not going to police the parking. So it's one of those things that sounds good here, but it's not going to happen. But there are other things like the, what were the examples I wrote down? The fences and the walks, will on, I think it was lot 1 that's not allowed to have a fence next to it. It's one of
Lot 5.
Lot 5, thank you. That's, not allowed to have a fence next to it. And there won't be one right until the homeowner sort of builds one without asking HOA and ARC and all those things. And, it's one of those things that happen. And in the walls across the property lines, another thing. You can see someone going, well, it's here, I'm going to build my fence across it, and unless they get the proper approvals, even at that point, ARC might not even recognize that as an issue of crossing those walls. So I think there's things that come up here that we need to be cognizant of, because that stuff does not get passed along to the ultimate homeowners, or certainly the second and third generation of homeowner. Even the first generation homeowners don't know really
Right.
the history of what they're buying for the most
Well,
part.
having had to read my in-laws' CC&Rs,
It's a fun holiday for you.
yes, and I will tell you that most people don't. But the way that we try to communicate, or at least capture these, is in the final plat. We will put limitations on whether you can have a fence or not, or the height of the fences into the final plat, because then it shows up on your title. So if you read your title, if the ARC or the city has concerns, we have a mechanism to go back. It is not perfect, because most people don't read those.
Right.
But it is the tool that we have to try and communicate and capture that intent.
Great.
I'd just like to, sorry,
No, go ahead, Ben.
echo Jeff and Carl's sentiments about traffic and all that. I think that's something that it's always going to present itself. I agree 100% with them. And it is reporting, it is dealing with it. I think the IHCA and the Highlands Council has done a good job of trying to figure out how to calm traffic in conjunction with the city. This is no different. I think if there's a problem on College Drive, that will present itself, and they'll continue to work towards getting it done. Parking, I understand what you're saying, that there's 2 spots per property. Let's face it, a lot of people don't park in their garage, and so that can be somewhat self-correcting. If you can't find a parking spot every day, maybe you throw some stuff away and clean out your garage. But at the same point, if they've fulfilled the need for what we require, then that's what we can ask for.
We've had that conversation. Per the rules, you're not allowed to use your required parking for anything else except for parking. But we know that people use their garage for storage. That's why we are happy to see when they have 2 parking stalls on the apron or driveway, because those are available. Now, the problem then becomes when you have guests. As one of the residents spoke, it's the season when you have parties and you have people over, and it's difficult when you can't find parking in your own neighborhood. I think our because we're not trying to build storage units with every house, AKA a garage, we do believe that the important thing about this is, as you said, it's in their control. If you want parking, if you want 4 guaranteed parking spaces, then you use your garage for parking and your apron for parking. If that isn't important to you, or storage is more important, then you don't. So it's, again, it's not a perfect system, because we do have a lot of people who, and you know, frankly, it's not just about people using their garages for storage. It's just often more convenient to park on the apron rather than to pull into the garage. It's maybe tighter. You're getting out with lots of kids, whatever. So, but I think the important thing is that it's in each homeowner's control, the choices that they make based on what is more convenient and more important to them.
Thank you. And I do agree with Michelle with regard to density and going from 50 to 10. I mean, that was the developer listening to what we asked for. You know, if you look at, and I'm going to use a different place, but, you know, the Showbox controversy in downtown Seattle, where you've got a developer that's now suing the city for $40 million, you know, they own the property. And that's the trouble with this kind of situation. If you've guaranteed an entitlement to it, or it has an entitlement when they bought it, and then they can't build on it that way, that's the problem, so.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I'll say regarding the parking, that's also one of my pet peeves, is not that people don't use I prefer if people use their garages and then their driveways before they start using the street. And I, as someone with many people who drive in our family, we do that. We use both our garages and then both our driveway spots, and then anything overflow is, you know, shared street parking. But people can, for whatever reason, can decide to do what they want to do. But at the same time, and I'm not speaking to this group here specifically, but in general, we saw it in another neighborhood that I won't speak of right now, where they all complained about parking, and we did an assessment on who's actually using their garages. I don't remember what the numbers were, but they were extremely low in terms of the percentage of garages that were being used for cars, and yet those were the same people that were complaining about the lack of parking. And so I think, you know, we all have our own internal battles, and what's convenient to us or what we think is important may not be the same as somebody else. So that's just a general statement. It probably doesn't help you guys, I'm sorry, but we've seen it a lot around here, and I do wish people would use their garages for that purpose, because it'll help everybody out. I will say this, though, that I'll ask Richard and the applicant that if and when this is built, that, you know, this is a very tight spot. It's there are established homes here. We've seen construction all over this community. You guys know how to do it. There are rules in place that you have to follow. But I would just say that I would love to see, particularly in this tight location, in this small area, with these factors around it, that, you know, we do everything we can to mitigate any safety, timing, noise, dust, whatever that you can. And I know it's, you know, and if that means, you know, if you can shorten the length of time that construction is happening, or, you know, do as much as you can that would affect the street, you know, in a shorter period of time as you can, and then move to the other part of the property. I don't know how it works, so I'm not going to obviously dictate that. But if there's anything you can do to mitigate that, I do understand those concerns, and I would love to see that happen as well.
So I will just add that the city of Issaquah has the most restrictive construction hours in the Pacific region.
Hours, yeah.
And weekends are not a guarantee, and it's only Saturdays, and we are, as they can attest, it is very hard to get Saturday work permits. We have also kind of learned, partly through redevelopment in existing developed areas like on the valley floor, but you know, one of the things that we're working through quite a bit with Block 19 down behind Marshall's is trying to find where are the construction workers going to park, where are you going to do your laydown area, and we've already started having those conversations, at least on a staff side, because we recognize that these last sites are very challenging. There's not the kind of extra space hanging around that we're used to having in the earlier phases, back when you newcomers came, the old timers.
I can't remember, I should know this, but is there parallel parking on College Drive? There should be, right? All up and down it, right?
Couple up by the school, time restricted, by the trash and recycling
Just a
enclosure.
couple spots?
Yeah.
Not all the way up? I was thinking it.
I think it's these right here you're talking
Oh, okay.
about.
I was just thinking that would be a great place for construction parking for people that are coming to work on the construction site, that instead of taking up resident or overflow resident parking.
It will be something we'll have a lot of
Yeah,
discussion.
okay. Well, anyway, you get the point, and
Yep.
I mean, you guys are professionals and will do everything you can, I'm sure, but I'd love to have that, just top of mind for the sake of the residents. All right, any other comments?
I just wanted to make one last general comment when have been several comments about the size of the plat and what's going in it, and I realize this is not an SDP preliminary plat, so we're not looking at the actual homes yet, but when you sort of project those on and you look at the homes around it, to me, and this is almost a question, Lucy, it looks like it fits into the character and the scale of the rest of the neighborhood, that those houses, if they had been built at the same time, it would hardly be noticeable, is how I'm looking at it and approaching it, is one of the things I get.
I mean, from my
agree.
conversations with Polygon, I think that's their intent, is that it's going to be very similar character, and that it will have a relatively seamless
And if you-
quality. Now,
In that photo, if you picked, 5 homes from Falls Drive and 5 homes from, I think it's 14th it's called, and projected them on there would still be room left over, so it's not really that drastic of a change to that area.
right.
Okay.
It's a change. I mean, I think that's.
It's not grass,
It is
I
a
get it.
change.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what we're hearing is change means something different. It means uncertainty. And there are concerns about, what is the impact to me going to be while that's happening and after it's done? And will that be a sense of loss? And that, is an understandable question.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree.
Okay, so any other comments before we move on? So action?
If you are ready to, the one thing that I have heard from the commission,
Sorry?
Raising your hand?
Oh, I'm sorry, did you have something? Yeah, would you like to respond? Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Lucy.
no, it's okay. Didn't.
Yeah, I think just 2 things. I wanted to clarify that the intent is that this community, from architectural point of view, the scale of the house is, if not identical, it should be not noticeably different from the homes that we built for Forest Ridge. The same color palette, the same height, the same, embellishments and window trims and those kinds of things. And so that certainly the intent is to have it look as if 5 years from now, you didn't know that this came in 2 years later. And then just a minor point, because there was a bit of discussion on it. Lot 5, in terms of fencing, I would like to clarify, our intent is that the fence, there's no side yard fence. Typically between 2 lots, there's a fence down the middle, we have a trail. There will be a fenced rear yard. It'll return to the rear of the house, but it's not going to project into the landscape buffer or that trail system. And I want to be sure that that's what we're talking about. Okay.
Thank you.
That's it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
So the one item that I heard, and I know you'll correct me if I've misunderstood, is condition number 3, which was adding or extending an easement. Instead, we were talking about extending the track, and the applicant was open to that. So if that is of interest, what I would do is type that into the motion, so it's available for you guys to use this evening, as well as edit, to make sure I capture your intent.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Let me see. This is right.
So the underlined is what was, basically I took everything else out.
Okay. Okay, so commission, minus Carl. Plus Carl.
It was Thursday.
Would anybody like to take a crack at the motion and then actually discuss it after the motion?
I did the last one. I can do this one if you like.
Go for it, Ben.
Now, I would read what's up there as opposed to,
Here, I can also make it.
Make it bigger, please. There we go.
How's that? Is that big enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost, my vision's going bad, but, so, motion for approval, Parcel D, preliminary plat. I move that the Urban Village Development Commission recommends approval of the City Council of Parcel D, preliminary plat, file number PP 18-000.
There's one too many zeros in there.
who would know?
File PP-18000001, as described and evaluated in the staff report dated December 10, 2018, and plat drawings received July 24, 2018, and subject to the conditions as identified in the staff report, revised conditions number 31 in the staff presentation, and as amended this evening. Number 3, with submittal of the final plat, Tract A will be extended with similar width to meet Tract B. This will be confirmed with the final plat. And I move that the Urban Village Development Commission direct all development services department to prepare findings of fact and conclusions for review and approval by the UVDC chairman, affirming the UVDC's decision to approve the Issaquah Highlands Parcel D preliminary plat, file number file number PP18-0001, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, modified in the staff presentation, and amended this evening.
Okay, we have a motion. Any discussion before we go to a vote? Okay, at this time we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And at this time I'll take a vote. All in favor of the motion to be approved? Aye. Any? No. So it's approved unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the public, thank you to the staff, and thank you to the applicant. Next on the agenda, we have audience comments, and I'm not sure why we have audience comments.
No, I'm
on the-
not either, because that would be part of the
Yeah,
preliminary plat.
so if anybody wants to, say what they're doing for the holidays, no, just kidding. Bad joke. New business, other business, and announcements. I don't have any announcements. Do you have any announcements?
Well, I think the thing I think you all know this because Dominique has been pulling the bejesus out of you. But our next meeting would be January 30th. That would be a discussion of the High Street conversion survey results and the sort of concept for High Street based on those results. You'll get a memo summarizing sort of the history and how we got here and what was in the survey. Polygon has hired Hewitt Landscape Architects, who did Grand Ridge Plaza, they helped put the visual images together for the survey, and have done a really, in my view, a nice job of analyzing them and making recommendations. And so we'll bring that forward. The mayor had asked, and I think it was a really good suggestion, not try and do it tonight or tomorrow night and wait until January, so that we have a better chance for a better turnout. Because we really want a robust conversation about how this is going to move forward. That's the whole point of doing this. It's an unusual thing.
Do you anticipate that being our last meeting?
I do think that's going to be your last meeting. I mean, there is one remaining plat. It's related to IHIFC. We're waiting for resubmittal. We don't know when that will be. We assume that the commission will be around maybe until May, but we don't know whether we'll be processing that permit in that time or not.
Okay, may I ask, and I don't need an answer, but if you could consider sort of an update, for everything that's sort of left in the Highlands. If that happens to be our last meeting or even close to our last meeting, I would love to have an update about where we are, where things go from here, for our benefit and the benefit of the public as well. Just say, hey, we've got these two outstanding issues. Here's how they're going to be handled. These projects have been approved and are, slated for construction at this time. Whatever you think is
Right.
appropriate, I think that would be great to sort of send us off into the
Yeah,
sunset a
no,
little
it's a
bit with a
great
little bit
idea.
of a closeout. And then, let's see, I do have one thing I'd like to bring up, and Sarah, I'd love for you to hear this too, because I don't know what you know about this or anything, if anything, but I have been deeply troubled by the Grand Ridge parking, and I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm going to just say it is, and I did have a chance to talk to Craig Ramey of Regency Centers, but apparently someone has decided to put a 2-hour parking limit with a originally $40 penalty if you overstay that welcome, which has now mysteriously gone to $50 penalty in between the Issaquah Highlands Starbucks and Jimmy John's, that whole lot in there. I have personally boycotted the entire area since I learned about this because it's really ticked me off, to be 100% honest with you. This was intended to be a community where you can live, work, and play, where you can go to have a meal, get your nails done, watch a movie, spend time at the Starbucks, whatever you're going to do. And 2-hour limit to me is completely ludicrous, ridiculous, and a slap in the face. Nobody in the community, as far as I know, was notified, was asked about it or anything. It's pushing the staff that works at all of those locations onto the street, which their cars onto the street, which then takes away street parking from someone like me who might have parked in there for a few hours. Now I can't park on the street because all the staff is parking on the street. And I'm told that that was the only lot that it was going to happen. Yesterday, I was informed that it's now been also mirrored at the Bevmo lot. And I was also told by a person who was doing the enforcement that they have been instructed to count the spots in all the other lots, including the garage at the movie theater, which troubles me to no end. I do recognize that there are some park and ride issues, that people are parking and staying for a long time, and that does hurt the businesses. But I think a more reasonable, if anything is in there, it should be a more reasonable 4 or 6 hour requirement. And at the very least, have a discussion with the community about what's proper and not. Because I think this totally flies in the face for what we're trying to do as a community. And I fear the next step is we're going to start seeing meters or paid parking or something. And I don't know if the city has any say in this, if the IHCA is considering or thinking about or even aware of what's going on. But I'm livid about it, to be honest with you, personally. And whether anybody cares about that part, I don't know, but I think they should care about what's happening with the parking.
As a resident that lives directly across the street from that parking, I share your sentiments and have experienced personally being accosted by a parking attendant when we stopped to have dinner and a movie, and they said we had overstayed our welcome.
Yep.
Dinner and a movie.
Not right.
So when we had our meeting interrupt us November 6th.
Oh, yeah.
And you mentioned that to me. That was the first I'd heard. And the only thing that I can add to this is, the city is doing a parking study. It's predominantly focused on Front Street and downtown, but because Craig had identified Craig Ramey, who you mentioned with Regency Centers, had identified concerns up in the Bevmo lot. That was the one I had heard about from him. There was some extension of that parking study up into this area. I have not seen the results of that study. I think they may be out, so I don't know what they demonstrate, but that's the only aspect of it that I'm aware that the city has studied.
And I wrote a letter to Regency Centers on their website and their communication, in addition to While I'm a rare poster, I did sort of post negative comments about the parking, and I was told, oh, it's only the Bevmo parking lot, and I hadn't realized it was already the Starbucks parking lot. So they're even disingenuous in what they're putting out for information as well.
And the fact that
Very frustrating.
it's $40, and then I walked by it just the other day, it's now 50, they put a sticker on it, it's now $50, plus a $50, penalty fee if you don't pay within however many days. But I guess part of my question, or a question is, when it was built, were there any rules put on what can and can't be done, or any guidelines what can and can't be done around charging for parking? Or, I know that even when someone started painting the 30-minute limit in front of some of the stores, there was some discussion about that, and that's sort of gone away, and I 100% ignore that, and I will continue to ignore that, because what these 4 spots any different than the other 4 spots across from or next to it. So I want to know, is there any recourse or anything in the guidelines that say that they can or cannot do that we should be aware of?
So I would say the development agreement is generally, it's generally silent about it. And we want to encourage people to have a different relationship with their car. Beyond that, was there something in their permit? I'd have to go back and look at it. It's just been too long for me to be competent about. I know there was a lot of discussion about parking and wanting to have a sort of district parking approach, but beyond that, I just don't remember.
Well, and I vaguely recall, part of the compromise, and this may not be the sort of the legal way to look at it, but part of the compromise of having small buildings and big parking lots is that people could use those parking lots and move around and do what they want to do.
We explicitly talked about it during the meeting about you park once and you walk to others. So it
Yeah,
absolutely
and so,
happened.
if they didn't want that to happen, we should have done something else, built, taller buildings, have underground parking, or whatever, whatever the rules are around that. But anyway, I just don't think it fits within the character or the spirit of what we've been trying to do there. And to me, it's the slow and early creep of, downtown Bellevue or something else that's just not very favorable
And
for
if one
us.
of our largest community complaints is about traffic, that's just what we need, is more people cruising around looking for parking places because they have to move their cars. It's
Ridiculous. Yes, Sarah, please, would you?
no, just let us go on and on and on and on.
Just for the record, IHCA does not own or maintain any of the parking lots that are owned by Regency Centers. We have no rights to those. We don't even do the tree pits inside of those. We only maintain the streetscapes. And then the city maintains the streets. So I have been visited by individuals that are doing the parking study for the city. Main focus is obviously around the metro. We do have an extreme problem in the Highlands with individuals who are storing unused vehicles in street parking. It is ongoing. I am continuously calling in to the city for vehicles that do not move, that literally, if we lived in New Mexico, would have tumbleweeds under the wheels, and in this case, moss. We have derelict cars around the YW area and in the metro area. Right now, there's an abandoned, probably not running, I haven't looked at the license plate yet, Jeep in the Bevmo parking lot. And so I think Regency Centers is getting a lot of pressure from their owners, their business owners, to get these people that are parking at the park and ride out of the spot so that people can come visit their business. So I wasn't aware of the parking time or the fines that they had implied. I do have some concerns as well that would continuously get more painful for the community, and it shouldn't be. But it's not just those parking spots, it's what's happening to those parking spots and who's impacting them.
Thank you for that. I would say that I have great concern that you don't know about it.
Yeah.
Right? How do you not know about it? How does Lucy not know about it?
Yeah.
How does nobody know about it except some jackwadded resident who walks by there and makes a stink, but because he sees a woman taking down people's license plates?
Yeah.
That was me. No one else has said anything as far as I know.
Yeah, and
so I'm very concerned about that.
Yeah, I agree that needs to be addressed, because
I
I
would
didn't
say-
approve any signage to go up.
Yeah, well, it's horrible. And it's also non-readable. You wouldn't know it unless you were right up against it.
Right.
The only reason I saw it because she said it's been there for months. I said, there's no way this has been there for months.
Yeah, I don't
But the only reason I knew about it was because I saw her taking down license plates, and I asked questions. But I will also say that, to me, it smacks of a bit of a money grab more than anything else. If the real concern is derelict vehicles in the parking lots, tow those suckers away.
I
mean, it's not
continuously
that
make
difficult. Like, I'll do it. I'll start a towing company.
I continuously make calls, and
Yeah.
literally what I'm told is if the vehicles, even if they're not moving, it's hard for us to prove that they're not moving unless I go and chalk their tires or something.
And
that
again-
if they have proper tags on the car, that the city can do nothing about it. So we have multiple vehicles, even now in Westridge South. We have a ton of people that are parking their cars that they don't use from West Highlands. Just stored
I
on the
guess
street.
my point there, without beating the dead horse,
Yeah.
is, look, if a time limit needs to be put on it so that something can be enforced, let's do that. But let's make it a reasonable time frame, or suggest that it's a reasonable time frame or something. 2 hours is not that reasonable time frame. If you're talking about somebody that's taking a bus somewhere, they're probably not going to go and come back in 2 hours.
Right.
It might be 4 or 6 hours or something. I don't like any time limit, but I understand the problem, and I'm not opposed to a reasonable solution. But this, to me, is just wrong from beginning to end.
I also have additional information is that I know that the Metro station is considering putting permitted parking inside of the Metro Park and Ride, so people that don't have permits would then be forced out onto city street parking. And that's going to cause even more problems down the
will.
road. So it's a multi-level problem, but I do think that we need to work with the city and see if we can come up with a better resolution.
And I also think
And
we
I
need-
look forward to seeing the parking study.
Yeah, and I also think we need to fight King County Metro on that, because that's also not what was designed
That would-
early on. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, thanks for hearing me out.
Absolutely, thank you.
Sir.
Yeah, this is absurd. Anything else? No? Okay. Anything else from you, Lucy?
Nope, that was it.
Thank you. All right, thanks, everybody. We're going to adjourn this meeting at 8:45.
See you January 30th.
Not tomorrow night.
Not
Not tomorrow night.
That's right.
Thank you.